From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster.
Welcome back. My name is John. I'm the host of the Dewey Pod Monster podcast. This is your podcast about consumption. With me, as always, is the host of the Dewey Pod Monster podcast. I'm pretty sure he's not as thrilled about the Amityville Thanksgiving as I am, and he is still the authority on Michigan craft beer. Sean, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I don't know enough about Thanksgiving or the Amityville one to know if I should be a fan or not. But I'm willing.
It's a horror movie with the turkey.
Yeah, I'm open. I'm open to it.
I mean, I don't need much more than that. There's a turkey that kills things.
Should we give the backstory on this whole Thanksgiving thing, or just move it up?
Well, Thanksgiving is a different movie. Amityville Thanksgiving, the one I sent you yesterday, is a new movie that is in post-production right now.
And it doesn't have the same turkey.
I don't believe so.
They're not affiliated at all?
As far as I know, they're not. This is a whole new Thanksgiving-themed horror movie.
With a turkey.
With a turkey. Presumably in the Amityville house. I don't really know for sure. I didn't watch. There is a trailer. I chose not to watch it because I was sold on the poster alone.
Okay. I mean, I'm open to it.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Because I'm probably going to, suggest
to it
at some point. It's either going to be that or that new movie with fucking guy who just got dumped by Kardashian, Pete Davidson. It's an A24 movie that just came out. Bodies. That's what it's called.
What is it? What is it?
Yeah, I was like, it's called Bodies. It's either came out this week, maybe last week. So
I have heard of this. I came out from underneath my rock to have heard, but don't know anything about Bodies.
If I'm sure they won't tell us this going into it, but if I'm promised Pete Davidson getting killed, I might be okay with that.
Again, I would be down.
Yeah. So what have you been up to this week?
We talked just a couple days ago, not really too much. I think I forgot to mention last time. Okay, so I started watching Hard Knocks, which has to do with our hapful, one of the two, Detroit Lions, right? Love them or hate them, love to hate them. That's the Detroit Lions, so that's something. I started watching that. I don't know if you got a chance to watch that yet. I
haven't. I was gonna yesterday, but I got distracted by the new episodes of Beavis and Butthead. So
okay, yeah, it's a pretty good. It's Hard Knocks. It's hard not to be good. In general, they've been pretty good. I think I got soured on them at some point. I think one of the Cowboys ones, because it seems like they did the Cowboys like multiple times. And I think one of those...
They've done them twice. I didn't like I think it was the Dolphins season. That one was kind of mostly because Joe Philbin's just not good TV.
Yeah, he's very boring.
Yeah, and maybe it was the Cincinnati one that got boring near the... no, it wasn't that. It was the Rams one. That one got really boring when with Jared Goff the first time around, which I heard in this one, they pretty much avoided Jared Goff like the plague. So
yeah, they don't talk to him much in this first one. I mean, he's on camera and stuff, but that I haven't seen an interview. And I watched a Nolan Ryan documentary that just came out. It's called Chasing Nolan. And it's about basically his career, like how he started his entire baseball career from like Little League. I mean, just kind of, they briefly touch on it, right? There's no clips or anything. And then his start with the Mets, and then his eventual move to the Angels, and then to the Astros and to the Rangers. It's a really interesting documentary. They kind of lay out all the different stats. And I didn't realize he had almost like a 1,500 or plus strikeout advantage over the next person. I didn't realize he was quite at that dominant over time. I mean, I was young when he retired. Not too young, but young enough to not realize that he had been around. Number one, I knew he was older, right? Because that was a big deal, but I didn't realize he had that many strikeouts. I mean, I knew he had the 7 no-hitters and all that stuff. But so if you're kind of if you're like me, and you kind of know a little bit about Nolan Ryan, and he just kind of seems like an interesting character, it's really good. I mean, it was executive produced by him, so they give a real good access to his life. I mean, you see his family life, a lot of interviews with him current day, or at least within the last few years. They go talk to a bunch of other major leaguers, Hall of Famers, Randy Johnson, batters that faced him. It was just a really interesting kind of thing if you're interested at all in baseball and you want to know something about this bigger than life character, basically. He's like the Michael Jordan of baseball. Maybe not like, you don't think of Nolan Ryan as being like the person you think about when you think of baseball like you do Jordan for basketball. Maybe today it's more LeBron James or somebody like that, but it's a really interesting career and a really interesting life that he led.
Such a different sport. You can't really call a player in baseball the Michael Jordan of baseball because no player does everything. Like
Right.
you either I don't remember if he was NL or A. So in fairness, I should state ahead of time that I'm not a huge baseball fan. I used to try to claim that I was a baseball fan, but I realized over time that I really just like going to the park and drinking beer in the sun.
Yeah.
Maybe having a hot dog or something like that. And having a game on is just fine. But I'm a far cry from like a historian of any type of baseball statistics. But even when you get a guy who's like a really dominant pitcher like a Nolan Ryan, I don't know if he was a hitter or not. Like, he played in the NL, didn't he? Or was he AL?
He played both. When he was
played
at the
both.
Rangers,
So-
which is who he retired with, he was in the American League. But they said he's like the worst. He has the lowest batting average of any pitcher, basically, ever.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and again, I wouldn't expect maybe this is an AL stigma thing, but I wouldn't expect a pitcher to be a good hitter because they pitch. You just can't be you could be a dominant player in baseball, but not to the same way where you're affecting every aspect of the game the way that a guy like Jordan did.
Yeah, I mean, there's less players in basketball, and there's more opportunity just the way the game is played for a single player to make a big impact. It's kind of like saying football, like one player can carry a team, which they can't. I mean, a superstar player like a Barry Sanders is a massive impact on your offense,
Sure.
but he doesn't play defense.
He doesn't play defense. Right. Yeah, that sounds, I mean, I'd probably watch, I'm a junkie for pretty much any type of sports documentary or, miniseries. I watched one this week and I can't remember what it is now. It was on ESPN. It was one of their ESPN 60s or 30 for 30 or whatever they call them now. But for whatever it was, I can't remember it. So it must have been really good.
Yeah.
So good podcast.
Left a big impression.
Talking about something. Yeah. But yeah, aside from that, the only thing, because we only recorded a couple days ago, so going behind the curtain, but the only other thing I really made a point of watching was the new episodes of Beavis and Butthead. And I'm finding more and more that I just really like the character of Beavis. I don't really care about anyone else on the show. I just think he's like genuinely still funny, where like they got Anderson in this and they don't even call him Anderson for some reason. Maybe they can't, or they just chose not to, but they just call him old guy through the whole thing, which it's kind of funny, but it's also like, well, he's always been Mr. Anderson. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Warner Brothers copyrighted that with The Matrix. Who knows? Seems like it would be a hard thing to copyright, and yeah, just watching them get hurt and stupid is just still genuinely entertaining to me. But yeah, other than that, it's been a kind of, typical week, just stupid work, stupid stuff like that. On the plus side, though, we did have an excuse to go back and watch one of the better campy movies out there. And I don't just mean campy in terms of the subject matter. This week's topic is one that is probably a little more near and dear to my heart, because I know we went into this with you having not being fresh to this, having not seen this before. And this is one that I don't want to go as far to say I fell in love with it, but I discovered it as a kid. This is one of my infamous, like, I saw the box in the video store and the box made me very curious about it. And like I said many times on this podcast before, I would walk up and down the horror movie aisles and just find something that looked weird or intriguing. And that's how I would pick what I was renting most of the time. So we'll have to include a picture of the original poster to this in the liner notes, because it's one of the better ones that comes to mind. But we're talking about the movie from 1983 titled Sleepaway Camp. Sleepaway Camp came right off the heels of Friday the 13th, Part 1, Part 2, and maybe Part 3, right around the same time as that. In the 80s, they were just firing out Friday the 13th pretty quick, so wouldn't be surprised if they already were on 3 by the time this came out. If not, it would have been in production, I'm sure. This movie is... The shorthand synopsis of it is this is a summer camp slasher movie. Before I start gushing over it, like I said, you came into this fresh. What are your initial thoughts on this one? Or where do you want to start with this?
So I didn't really come into watching this movie with any real preconceived notions. I didn't really know much about it. I knew that it was a movie that you had enjoyed. I knew it was a movie that has a fan base. I didn't realize that like this was the director Robert Hiltzik first movie. I don't know how many movies he had actually written, but this is the first movie he directed, and it remained the only movie he directed until the remake just a couple years ago that came out.
I thought he did.
So I didn't really have any real.
Also.
What's that?
I thought he did part 3 also. I could be wrong about that.
I thought I read that.
Anyway,
we could look real quick. Let me just look it up because I need to know now. Writer, director.
Well,
Sleepaway Camp return. Okay. Anyhow, so I didn't come into this with any real preconceived notions. I didn't really have any ideas or what to think. I didn't watch any trailers. I didn't really know much about it. When I did watch it, I was kind of struck by a few things. Now, I think I'm gonna do the too long didn't listen for anybody listening out there, and then we can talk about it. I didn't really find that there was anything about this movie that was really remarkable. Like there wasn't anything that really stood out as being overly great. And I knew because you had actually sent me something that was a bit of a spoiler for the end, but I kind of forgot what exactly the spoiler was. I am too hot.
Did I do that
on this microphone.
I don't think I would have done that on purpose.
No, you didn't. You just I am too hot on this mic. I got to turn my mic down. I don't know what's going on and why it's so loud on my end.
Oh.
Okay. I'm just watching my levels and they're like hitting the red constantly. No, you didn't do it on purpose. Fucking Christ. I am just full of piss and vinegar right now. All right. No, you didn't do it on purpose. I think you thought that I had already seen it. So not your fault. I'm not like blaming you or anything, and I didn't remember what
this movie's got enough of a cult following that, to be honest, if we hadn't talked about it before, I would have just assumed this is right into your wheelhouse, knowing what kind of, for lack of better, what kind of shitty movies you like. It's the same type of shitty movies I like.
Yeah. No, I think I just didn't get around to it. It's not, I knew of it. It was just not ever on my radar, but I didn't really find, other than the twist at the end, I did find some parts to be kind of amusing or, I don't know how to say it. I think when we talked about Prey, you mentioned special effects. And one of the things you mentioned about special effects was that they would do these cutaways where they would show somebody about to get got, and then they would cut away and they would show like the shaft of a spear, like stabbing someone, but they wouldn't show the spear actually stabbing them. And that kind of stuck with me because in this movie, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of people mysteriously, it's a slasher movie. It's a camp slasher kind of movie. People die in horrific ways. And there's actually a couple people that don't even get killed. Like the first guy, I think not the first guy. The first guy is the dad in the water, but the first person from the camp is the cook, and he doesn't die. And I never really quite understood. He knew who the person was. Like it's you. It's like one of those things where he acknowledges that it's a person that he knows who it is, but they never go and question him to find out who it is. And I don't know if it's like, they kind of mention like his eyes could be scarred, but I would think that he'd still be able to communicate in some way. Nitpick, of course, but I didn't really find it to be, I don't know. It's hard because it doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? It has all this stuff that surrounds it. Like we've seen all these movies that have come since. And by the standard of the movies, like all the slasher movies that have come since, it's not great. The movie part of it. But if you think of it in the context of like, it came on the heels of all these Friday the 13th movies, and some obviously other slasher movies came out since then too. I still don't find it all that great. I mean, it's competent and it's very unique. It's very unique in the respect that all the actors are young kids and they're playing young kids, which I do commend quite a bit because a lot of movies, I'm playing 14, but I'm 34. They play like way under their age. So this did have kids, and I commend it because it's very competent in that way. But I just didn't find much of it to be like much to crow about, like not much to be like, yeah, you got to see this movie. It wasn't that kind of movie for me.
So while you're saying that, I kind of scrolled down looking at the cast on IMDb, and the chef that you're referring to, his name's Artie. I really like that the actor's picture on IMDb, his name's Owen Hughes. is straight from that scene. There's actually a couple actors that their death is their picture on IMDb, which I kind of like.
Yeah.
You know, with the cutaway thing, I don't want to say necessarily in defense, but the reason why I would say that bothered me in Prey, where it doesn't really bother me here, is not only are we talking about like a whole different like style of movie, but it's also, I'm going to take a radical guess that Sleepaway Camp probably had a fraction of the budget that Prey did. And you're looking at me like maybe not. I don't know.
No, I was just going to make a joke that I looked in the budget was actually $500 million on Sleepaway Camp. So I think you're wrong there.
No fucking way.
I think it was like $350,000 or something really small.
That sounds
like
more
that.
right. 500 million. Come on.
I was hoping you would bite on that one. Oh, really?
This is a $500 million, like maybe a $500 movie, but not 500 million. So
yeah, budget estimated is 350 grand.
Yeah, that sounds more accurate. So, but a lot of movies from this era do that kind of cutaway thing. You didn't really start seeing like Predator style over the top intense gore like that really until the last, like, I'd say 20 years or so. You'd see some more like gory stuff, like from practical effects standpoint. But for this kind of movie, it took a while before we got to that level of gore. And even when we did with that like kind of stuff, the MPAA came and cut it away half the time.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying, like, there are a lot of things that happen in this that are like shadows. I'm thinking specifically of the Judy scene is like a straight shadow, and it leaves a lot to your imagination to figure out what exactly happened.
Yeah, and I'm not arguing that, and I'm not going to try to act like this movie is the same quality as some of the great slashers out, like the big slasher like franchises, your Elm Streets, your Friday the 13th, Halloween, et cetera. Those are on a whole different like playing field than what this is. If those are Major League Baseball, these are like D League. At this type of movie is, something like that. But it is, and again, it is very campy, and I don't mean just in terms of the setting. It is poorly acted in a very stereotypical like mid 80s, early 80s kind of way. It very much so seems like a lot of people, especially the adults in the movie, they just pulled off the street and say, do you want to come be some creepy guy at a camp? And they just kind of stuck them there and let it go wild.
Hey,
the dialogue in this movie.
We have James Earl Jones, goddamn dad, in this movie. Okay.
Is he?
He is the other chef.
Oh, okay. Well,
so we've got top-notch talent
that's
here.
That's a selling point.
So creepy guy off the street being creepy, that's not really fair. James Earl Jones' dad. Okay. Think about it.
This movie's dialogue is about on par with a Rob Zombie movie, but somehow it works it's a little more enduring in this, and when you see Rob Zombie characters doing it. It's funny because this was shot in New York, and I forget what the camp was, but my initial thought was like, this had to be shot in New Jersey or something, because the way these kids talk, there's no way that like self-respecting people that are not from New Jersey would talk this way. So
yeah, I did really appreciate that they had their thick New York and New Jersey accents were on full effect, and I did. Mm-hmm. That was a plus in my mind. That went in the plus column.
I would go as far to say my favorite line in easily the whole movie, and I'm going to say most likely the whole franchise, is the "Eat shit and die, Ricky. Eat shit and live, Bobby." So
I did appreciate that you blow dog dick. That was a favorite of mine.
Yeah.
This guy blows dog dick.
There's some good insults that get thrown around in a very adolescent way, but again, you're talking about kids that are saying it, so it almost kind of plays off a little bit better. The actual look of the movie, it looks like a 1980s camp slasher movie. Like, there's nothing wrong with the actual quality of the shots or the scenery or anything like that. The effects range from kind of hokey to pretty good, depending on what scene, how far you want to really critique it. I've certainly seen a hell of a lot worse.
Oh yeah, no, I thought the effects were pretty good. I thought the bodies and stuff, for the most part. There was one specifically that near the end when they find the campers, like the 4 campers that were kind of there.
Yeah.
I didn't know what the hell I was looking at. I just thought they were like ripped up, like pillows and stuff. I mean, that's what it looked like. I looked at it and I'm like, what is this supposed to represent? Like, what am I supposed to be looking at here? I realize what it is now.
Right.
But when I was watching it at the time, I'm like, I don't know what the hell is supposed to be going on in what you're showing me right here. There's some stuff, when you say campy, there's some things that are actually like campy, and there's things that are like in camp. And I saw a lot of, I read a little bit about this, read what other people said to see if I was just way off base. And I think I was, based on some of the consensus that some people said, but I did really appreciate the extended baseball scene. I thought for some reason that just fit into the movie. Like, even though it doesn't have anything to do with anything, I thought it did kind of just fit in the movie really well. I thought it was kind of humorous that they did that.
I think that's what they thought of as character development for one reason or another. But especially if you compare it to the baseball scene that we just watched in the Black Phone a couple weeks ago, this is way more accurate to what you would see kids doing in an unsupervised baseball game.
Yeah.
I mean, this movie too, like it doesn't really linger too long. It moves along pretty quick. It doesn't have a high rewatchability because once you see the big twist at the end, I think we'll talk more extensively about that when we get to that point. But once you see the big twist at the end, everything that you see before it, like watching it a second time or a third time, I don't even know how many times I've watched this now. Like now it's just kind of in the zeitgeist where you just kind of can put it on and let it roll, and you almost wait for the last scene just because you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, this is going to happen at some point. Let's just get to the last scene.
You want to talk about that now?
No, we don't. No, I'm just saying when you're watching it, you're just kind of like, because once you've seen it once, you know what's going to happen. You know the big twist. The thing about that, and I'm not going to jump into it directly yet, but one thing that really confused me when I watched this, and I had to look and read about it, what I'm going to get to is the main reason that I read about stuff about this movie afterwards. And I guess it's because it's the HD, like, upscaling. There's the scene where the killer goes after Judy, and Judy's like this main antagonist, I guess, of one of the main characters, Angela, and her cousin.
She's just a dick through the whole movie.
She's a shithead. And her cousin, Ricky, is that before she gets killed, someone walks in the door. You don't know who it is at first, but then on the version that I saw, the HD version, they show the person standing in the doorway, and you can clearly see that it's Ricky. And then Susie, I keep calling her Susie, and I talked to you about this before. I keep calling her Susie for some reason. But Judy then gets assaulted with this curling iron. Assaulted as being really very like generic about what happens, and smothered with a pillow. And I'm thinking to myself, at that point in the movie, I'm like, so is Ricky the person that's supposed to be doing all this stuff? Because it's clearly Ricky. But I think what I had read was when they initially made the film, it was so dark you couldn't tell who the person was. It was just a figure with like hair. So that kind of threw me off, and that I had to really research, like, why did Ricky do this? Because he's not implicated in this much at all, like, besides this scene.
Yeah, and I almost wonder if that was, I know what you're talking about in that scene. That's one of the only points where they almost make you feel like they, especially in retrospect, where it feels like they're trying to throw you off from who the actual killer is through this movie. In the process, though, they do a really good job of just really killing off all the real shitheads in this movie. Like, there's no one that dies in this movie that you feel bad for.
Yeah, no, not at all. No, I mean,
right.
Most of the main characters and most of the characters that are named are shitheads.
Yeah. Yeah, you can even go as far to say that Ricky might be a shithead. He just hasn't quite got there yet. He's at least decent to his, I guess we'll call her his sister.
He's not a shithead to, he's not a shithead to Angela, but he is kind of a shithead to most other people that aren't his close friends.
Yeah, and his only real close friend is Angela.
And Paul.
Yeah. Maybe we should backtrack and talk about how so we didn't really even talk about the start of this movie. So this movie starts with a scene where we're on open water, and we don't really know what's going on. We just see a family out kind of they're on like a paddleboard or something like that.
It's like a sailboat, like a little sailboat.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're out on the lake, and you're seeing this guy kind of tool around in a speedboat, and it leads to essentially the speedboat. I don't remember if he loses control or why he does this, but he essentially just plows right into these two kids, and I'm assuming their dad or the male that's with them, and he's dead. you see a mangled up life vest kind of float away, and kids are crying, and dad is no more.
He's just
that
floating.
leads us that
There's no real gore, which I was kind of expecting to be gore from that scene. But
I think there was some blood in it, but
I don't think there's any at all.
That.
It's just a guy floating face first in the water and a chewed up life vest with some blood on it. But the people driving the boat it's like a couple younger people at this camp that they're talking about, Camp Arawak or whatever. And they're busy like arguing about who's going to drive or whatever. And the girl that's driving doesn't pay attention that she's too close to this boat, which the direction that they're heading, the speed that they're heading, there would be no way that they could not hit the land the way that they are driving, but they miraculously like avoid it by skipping over this guy and his kid.
And his sailboat or whatever. So, because the boat gets like airborne for a minute there.
It's a schooner.
Yeah. Sorry. So that leads us to basically we advance probably about 10 years or so from this point. These kids are younger, or they're probably a little older than that. They're right around like 14 to 16, I'd say, in that area, something along those lines. I don't think they ever explicitly say how old they are, but they're in that ballpark. And you see them about to get sent off to summer camp with this very, very bizarre mother-like figure or something. And she's giving them this weird speech. And I guess if you go back and watch it again, like, there's a very weird comment about the physical that Angela had to take to be able to get accepted into this camp. And they talk about just, it really foreshadows where the end is going in the movie. And it's one of those things that the first time you watch it, you're like, why am I even, what the hell? Let's get to camp. Let's go kill some people. And you're just kind of watching this weird prologue almost that just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense until you get to the very end of it. As we're traveling through this camp, you see these weird flashbacks. Like, they have a bunch of scenes where the two kids are on a bed. Like, I'm assuming what is going on the bed is Ricky is pointing at Angela's Adam's apple, but usually kids that age don't really have a Adam's apple showing.
That's interesting because I didn't get that from that scene. I got something like way more.
You're talking about the second scene, the one on the bed? On the bed,
where he's pointing at her.
Yeah.
I got like I thought way too much about what was going on in that scene, but we can come back to it after we kind of talk about where this ends.
No, we could. I don't really know if there's a better point to talk about it. I mean, because when I saw it, I just saw it as this, because you're seeing these flashbacks as they progress through the story. This is kind of right in the middle of the movie after we've had several people end up dead and people are starting to realize like, oh, we're going to get sued, and they're going to, well, they don't say that because it's the 80s. They don't think
they don't care about that.
But, right. They're more concerned about keeping the camp open and just sending the kids to the morgue. And, we'll tell the parents when they come to pick them up.
Right.
That's how you run a business back in 1983.
That's right. Yeah.
And yeah, you get to this weird scene. I don't even remember how they brought this scene on or why they did, but all of a sudden you're in this weird, like, dreamscape flashback where the two of them are sitting on a bed. And one of them's just pointing down the other. And like I said, to me, it looked like Ricky was pointing at Angela's throat. And again, knowing what you know at the end, we might as well spoil white.
The scene set up, I think it's so Ricky's friend Paul becomes interested in Angela. Angela isn't talking at the camp. He's the first one that she talks to. And they start to develop this little relationship. And Paul wants to push it a little bit further than I think Angela's comfortable with. And there's a scene where he's like, kissing her and trying to start to get to second base with her. And that's when that flashback occurs, I believe, if I remember correctly. I just literally watched this today, so a lot's even happened since I watched it, or my memory's just shit. So you're saying that to you, it looked like he was pointing at her throat. So they do a flashback where the kids are on the bed and they actually walk in. The dad is the man who was killed at the beginning. We find out is their father. Well, yeah, we'll say it's their father and their quote unquote. And then he's in bed with another man, which for 1983 is extremely progressive. And reading some of the criticism.
It's a pretty, it's not as graphic as you would see now, but for 1983,
it was like a big deal.
Yeah.
I read a lot of criticism saying that this was somehow like homophobic, this specific scene, which I don't understand how, because it's not graphic, and it's not, the kids are standing at the door laughing, and it's more because they're little kids and they don't know what's going on. They just think it's silly.
Yeah.
Right. But I think some people read shit into things too much, and they're like, well, the kids are laughing at them because they're ridiculing them. It's like they're kids. They don't know any different. But I digress. You're saying that you think that Ricky's pointing at Angela at her throat or at her neck. And I was thinking more of like Ricky is pointing at Angela because something like we're the same kind of deal. And maybe we're kind of just saying the same thing, but two different ways.
Yeah.
So fast forward to the end. Angela doesn't want to go on water because her father was killed when they were in the water. At the end, you find out like Paul kind of hits on Judy, or they kiss, or they exchange a kiss or whatever. And Angela sees this. This breaks up the relationship. This really pushes her over the edge to become this homicidal maniac, although this will make a little bit more sense. Well, actually, will make less sense when we get to the very end, which TLDR,
makes more and less sense. It's more
everything
and less
makes
sense
more or less sense as the more you know,
right,
in this movie. But at the end, she invites Paul down to the water. All these people they're finding dead. They're trying to search for Angela and Ricky and Paul and these kids that are all missing. And they go down to the water. Angela is topless with her back to the people coming up to her. Paul's laying with his head on her lap, and they say, Angela, you're all right or whatever. And she stands up and turns around. Paul's head has been separated from his body, and Angela turns around. It's the girl, Angela's face, but her body, she's a male. Like her dick is
right.
So
full display.
Yeah. And it's
which
really
is almost as shocking as anything else in this movie, not just because of the fact that you're seeing full frontal nudity, but because of the fact that you're essentially seeing full frontal preteen male nudity, which is like unheard of, even by today's standards.
Well, he's not.
I'm sure whoever the actor was not. It's probably, like you said, someone who's 18 and just looked like they were 15 or whatever. But but
I read it in my readings. I found out how they did this scene, and the thing that's even more shocking than the full frontal nudity is just this frozen mask that's on Angela's face, like the expression she's making, and there's just like these animal noises. And the movie does what I hate movies doing. But I think in a way I kind of admire the movie for doing this. It does a freeze frame, and then it fades to green, and they roll the credits.
Yeah.
So you find out that Angela is a male. Your idea of Ricky pointing at Angela's Adam's apple makes a lot more sense. And the other thing is, because Angela's body, you can tell from looking at the body, just the body, the male body, is that it's much wider than Angela's actual very up and down 14-year-old girl body is. So now I think back to the scene in the doorway where because it's HD, you can tell that it's Ricky standing in the doorway, or you can see Ricky's face. It makes more sense that they put Ricky, the actor that plays Ricky, in that scene, because then you see the little bit broader chest and shoulders. I think that kind of lines up to the end. But the way that they made that scene is they just made like a cast of Angela's face, and they put it on a college student that was, I don't know, he was like interning on the movie, or he was like a production assistant or something. And he got real drunk, and he said, I'll do this. And they just put a mask. That's why her face doesn't move, because it's just a mask that he's wearing, this guy nude. I don't know if the nude guy is credited anywhere, but it is shocking because of the way that whole thing looks. And that twist is, like, to me, and I think you kind of mentioned it earlier, it's really the whole reason to watch this movie, is to get to the end to see that twist. And once you know that that's it, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of like watching a murder mystery. You've seen it once, and unless it's really well made, there's no reason to watch it again. Like, I would watch Inception. I watched Inception a couple months ago because I had seen it once, and I was probably drunk, and I didn't really understand everything that happened. And I watched it again. I'm like, oh man, it makes a lot more sense. I mean, it's not as deep as everybody makes it out to be, but it makes a lot more sense. A movie like this, that's not really, there's nothing that really stands out that says, like, this is a great movie. To me, that's a reason not to have to watch it again. Like, I know the twist, and Chubby Checker's not there doing it, and there's not like any There's not really like any gory stuff that really was like, oh, that was a really cool effect. Some of the deaths or some of the dead bodies, quote unquote, look pretty cool. Mm-hmm. But to me, there's just really not another reason to watch it once you know what happens.
So I'll go as far to say this moment in the movie, the end of this movie, is probably one of the more what the fuck moments in arguably all of cinema, but definitely all of horror. Like the first time you see it, especially if you see it like now, I'm sure you had a pretty good idea of what you were going to get at the end of this movie even before you saw it, or you knew there was something coming.
Yes.
Watching it like I'm sure I saw this when I was like probably somewhere in the around 12 to 14, that area, without the internet, without having any idea of what any of this was. Cause back when I saw this, I never had any preconceived notion about anything that I watched. I just went and grabbed it, and
the cover looked cool. I'm grabbing it.
Pretty much. So yeah, I spent like a good 20 minutes like, what the fuck did I just watch after I watched this? And I think for me, that's part of why this movie kind of has more staying power I think if I saw it as a matured adult, well, mature might be the wrong word, but as an adult with like a better comprehension of like what storytelling is and what film is, I probably wouldn't have been as enamored by this movie as I was. But there's something about the time that you'd see it, the nostalgia for it, all that type of stuff, that all kind of plays in with why I like this movie, like probably a bit more than a lot of people do. As far as like rewatchability, you're talking about like a movie with a big twist ending that can still be rewatchable. If we were going to compare it to something like that, I'd say Scream is the gold standard when it comes to horror movies with big twist endings that you can go back and rewatch and they're still enjoyable because they're executed well. This is not anywhere near that by any stretch. Like, it's not that type of, it's not that well written. It's not that well thought out. And frankly, the story's not that well told as what they do in Scream. So it really doesn't hit the mark on that either.
I think it's,
but at the same time,
Go ahead. No, you finish.
At the same time, like, again, if you can find a way to go into this movie blind, and if you just like things that are kind of outside the box and crazy and weird, for lack of better wording, the movie's still a good time and worth kind of watching just on that alone.
I mean, I have arguments against that, but I think that you're saying like watching a movie with twists, and you could watch something like Scream, and we just watched that last month or 2 months ago or whatever we talked about on this podcast. Yeah, that movie is rewatchable because it has more than one twist. Like and the story is not just this surface level story. They did their due diligence by putting these little red herrings, I guess, wild goose chases in the movie to make you're constantly guessing. And even when you give it a little bit of time, you come back, you watch it again, you're still kind of, what happens at the end, ultimately what happens.
Yeah.
And that also helps you keep your eye open for, how did they do this? And the thing with Scream is it is so clockwork well done. And what I mean by clockwork is that there are all these pieces moving in the background that have to move in this specific way for it to be as believable as it is. Where with this movie, the only thing that we get that's kind of like throwing you off a little bit and something to go back to watch again for is, like you said, the mother aunt figure, Martha, whatever her name is, the physical part, because, hey, I'm signing these physicals. If just, I'm a doctor, remember? Ha ha ha. And that little piece, because Angela would not be able to get into the camp and sleep in a girl's, I don't know, shed or whatever, shack or whatever they call it, cabin, without being a female.
Shed is probably more accurate for this camp.
Yeah. And number two, we have the scene that I mentioned where Ricky comes in the door, and that might be, again, because he's a little bit more broad-chested, broad-shouldered to kind of throw you off. But they do I was going to say PPV or POV is what I meant, the point of view thing with the killer a la Friday the 13th. They kind of crib a lot of things. I think what you're saying about, I mean, I'm the biggest nostalgia addict that I know. I don't know anybody else that goes back and watches 1980s shows about junior high kids because it's cool to them like it is to me. So I totally get what you're saying about it being nostalgia. And I do feel like this is much more of you had to be there. like at the time. It had to hit you at a really impressionistic age, or it had to hit you in the period when a lot of this stuff wasn't coming out. So it wasn't so saturated. So it wasn't such, it wouldn't be so shocking to see this. Again, to me, I've never seen this movie. It was shocking, but it wasn't like, I didn't feel like I had to go back and watch, like, what am I watching? I wasn't like dumbfounded by it, but I could totally see myself as a 12, 13, 14-year-old kid, maybe even a 18, up to 18-year-old kid seeing this movie and being like, what the fuck did I just see? I think because I really do feel like it's a, you had to be there kind of thing with this movie. And I think a lot of people that are huge fans of this movie are huge fans of this because they saw it at that age that it really struck them. I'm just saying that, like, for me at this point in my life, it doesn't do anything that's going to strike me as being really out there. I can appreciate that for the time frame, for the time period, it does a lot of progressive things. It has a lot of progressive ideas, and it has, it has that twist, which would be extremely shocking in 1983, but watching it through 2022 eyes as a 40-plus-year-old adult, it just doesn't really do it for me.
And I get that. And to be honest, I would have been more surprised if you were like enamored by it, because you
tell me you set me up to fail here? You just set me up to fail?
No, but I expected exactly what I got, actually, because it is one of those, we're in a different age, not just a movie, but of what we have access to information wise. Like, even just looking this up to be able to find this movie, however you want to go about watching it, you're going to see more than what I would have seen going into it. So you would have had again, I already know how you got the movie, but for the sake of argument, let's say you do a quick Google search to look this up. You probably see just as many results talking about Angela's dick in this as you do ways to watch this movie just from a search.
True.
So it's hard to have that same, it's not even a level of expectation, but that level of ignorance to it where you don't know what you're getting. And again, for me, I was solely judging the book by its cover. That's all I did with it when I got that. So
to kind of piggyback off that, this is funny. I don't generally go, when I'm watching a series that I really want to watch, or a movie, I go on IMDb, I might look it up and see like who's in the movie. Like, oh, who is that guy? Because I did recognize Paul because he's been in stuff since this movie. I don't know if I recognize anybody else, honestly, but some people look familiar. So I was looking through a TV show I won't look at because it shows you how many episodes a character might be in. And if they die early, you can kind of sometimes tell from like when you watch the first episode and you look at IMDb, if Johnny's only in one episode, well, okay, he either dies or he's not a big character. But with this movie, I had my browser open and I searched up something about, I don't know who the actress of Angela was or something. And I didn't click.
Rose.
Yeah, well, Google has that little row of like different questions that people ask about the movie. You just click it. You don't have to go into a website. It just expands it and it tells you. So there was one thing and it was an answer that I had asked and I wanted to know and I didn't click it. And then when I finished the movie, I clicked it and it gave the major plot point away that if I would have looked at it before I watched the movie, it would have totally fucking ruined the whole thing. So like you're saying, you didn't have the information. You're just going solely based on, this is a cool movie. Believe me, I've been there. This is a cool movie cover. I want to watch this movie because it's probably not going to have anything to do with what's on this cover, but it caught my attention.
Well, and I kind of miss that. Well, I'm so kind of about it. We've talked about it before. Like it sucks that you can't go into things like that anymore. Like obviously, even when video stores were a thing, you could go in and kind of browse the shelves for, there were always blockbuster movies. You always knew what the new Bruce Willis movie was, or whoever the big star at the time was.
Robert
you
Goulet.
Knew what that was.
What's the new Robert Goulet movie coming out?
Did he do movies? I knew he did singing.
He probably
did he do
was.
Movies?
Guess he was on like in Mars Attacks, wasn't he?
I don't know. It's Tim Burton. I don't like Tim Burton.
Oh, that's true.
He would have been a good Gomez though. He had that kind of look. He could have pulled that off
for a time. Yeah.
But yeah, like that era of being able to just go, even like if you're scrolling through Netflix now, like if you stop on like a cover or something for more than 2 seconds, it starts playing clips from the movie. So it's almost impossible to go into a movie blind now, and to have that. And again, having it from a point where you could be more impressionable with it, or maybe this isn't where you would want to be impressionable, but have that mystique to it, I guess, it helped a lot for me, which I'm sure is where when we get to hot dogs here in a moment, that's going to show pretty dramatically between the two of us. So
I don't think I'll judge it quite as harshly as you think I will, but yeah, I think we'll be quite different.
I don't think it's going to be on the, where do you have it on your hot dog scale? I'll let you know where I would have pegged it, just taking a guess.
Are we just going to jump right into the hot dogs now?
Yeah, let's jump into
the hot dog section. We got the all the buns are out. Let's get some dogs roasting. I would say I would give this about 5.5 hot dogs out of 11. Out of 11.
That is exactly where I thought you were going to say it's 5.5.
Look at you. Mm-hmm. We're like an old married couple now. That counseling worked from the airing of grievances episode that we had to go through. It's mandatory. The podcast
it was very therapeutic.
Yeah, they served that that warrant. We had to go to the couples therapy. But yeah, I mean, I can appreciate it for 1983. Unfortunately, it doesn't live in a vacuum, and I think that the twist at the end is not enough to really carry it. I will say that I got a lot of ideas for my wardrobe based on this movie. A lot of half shirts, a lot of cutoffs, short shorts, nut huggers. I'm into it. Yeah, I'm into, well, I don't know about that, but I'm into all the other stuff. I like, especially the nut huggers. But yeah, I would just say 5.5 out of 11 frozen faces, just because, like I said, it's just, for me, I think I would have had to have watched it at a certain time in my life for it to make that impression. And at this point, I'm a little bit outside of that by like 20 years. I can appreciate it for what it is, but it's just not something I don't think I'd be like, you got to watch this movie. And I don't feel like I'd personally ever feel any reason to watch it again.
I'd put it right around 7 hot dogs out of 10 crotch merkins. Again, my rating on it's really heavily based on nostalgia and how I found it. And I'm not even trying to hide that. Like it has a lot more to do with the entertainment that I got from it the first time I saw it, when I didn't know much going into it, than any subsequent viewing since that. This is one that I'll still go back to on occasion and just pop in because, I got nothing else going on. Might as well watch some creeps get thrown in a boiler or whatever. But it is very much so a product of its time. It very much so, when you say campy B horror movie, and I'm not just referring to the camp part again, I got to find a better word to describe this, even though we're mostly through this episode. So why bother? It's all those things that you think of when you think of what goofy horror movies are from the 80s. It's bad dialogue. It's overacting and underacting somehow at the same time in the same scene, with a moderately, like, if they had a $350,000 budget, I bet you 300,000 of it went to the effects on the bodies. If you can find a way to watch this without listening to this podcast first, or somehow going through and having it ruined for you, it's absolutely worth going through and doing that. If you just want something that doesn't have Jason running around the woods, someone else killing people, it's worth doing that. If you're just a completionist and really want to get deeper into the slasher genre, I'd say it's worth watching for that. The sequels are a little bit different of a story, but that's a story for a different episode. So we'll come back to those way, way down the line, maybe. But for me, it's fun. It's a good trip down memory lane in a weird way. And it does do a lot of things in this movie that I didn't even really think of all that much, but it really is progressive in a lot of ways that movies just weren't back at that time period. So it's worth watching for that, I guess. I never really thought of it as ridiculing anyone other than the character of Angela in this movie. But I guess she kind of wins the day through ridicule, if you want to look at it that way. So yeah, I don't really have much else to add.
It's an oxymoron to call it a whatever you called it. A pubic merkin? Crotch merkin. Yeah.
There's chest merkins.
No. That's something else. A merkin is
it's
to cover the it's a pubic area covering.
It's a pubis?
Yeah. The pubi.
So while we were talking on this, I did notice too, I just because we were talking about the end scene, the guy who plays Ricky, he would have been 18 when they shot this movie. So he did do some of that acting down, because that guy, he was born in August 11th, 1965. So if this came out in 83, so maybe he was 17 when they shot it, but
I think it was shot in 82, but yeah.
He does not look like a 17, 18-year-old kid.
He doesn't sound like one either.
No. Truthfully, looking at this picture of him right now is recent. He doesn't look like a 60-year-old man either. So
yeah,
I would imagine
the dates are screwed up on that.
Maybe. But I mean, he was also in the movie Plan 9. Oh no, that's a soundtrack. He would never mind. No credit for you on. All right, I think this is a good place to wrap this one. We've gone on about this. So Sleepaway Camp, this one is available somewhere. I'm sure this is probably on Tubi or a bunch of other streaming stuff. It's not like something that I would imagine streaming services are fighting for. So you should be able to find this relatively easily, but check it out. Let us know let us know some feedback on this one. Did you watch this at a younger age and find this to be a really interesting movie? Or did you watch it as a old curmudgeon and just think, I've seen all these dicks before, I don't need to see another one? Let us know. In the meantime, follow us on all the socials. We're at Dewey Pod Monster. Of course, you could always listen, subscribe, and all that good stuff at anchor.fm/Dewey Pod Monster. And if you want to, you can leave us a voicemail on there. Maybe we'll use it in a upcoming episode. Sean, do you want to go ahead and plug all your stuff that you got going on?
Sure. Taking a slight hiatus on being the authority on Michigan craft beer. I mean, I guess I'll always be the authority, but at least on the videos, on the video front, you can find those, if you're interested, on past reviews at youtube.drafttherapy.com. That'll take you directly to my YouTube channel, where I talk about mainly Michigan beer, but I used to talk about other stuff as well, but mostly beer. And you can find me on all the social media at Draft Therapy.
All right. Well, we will be back at you soon. You guys have a good week, and I don't know, drink a bourbon or something. Talk to you later.